Well, hey, Bridgeway Church, it's so exciting to be here. I love K-Town. I used to live here back in the day in the late 90s, so I even bought my first house here, had a kid here, so I love Kokomo. But I'm telling you, you guys, I don't know whether to cry or laugh. This church is just like a modern-day miracle. I told Joel it's the unicorn church because what God is doing through and in you is just so awesome. So thank you. It's such a gift to be here. When my husband and I lived here back in the late 90s, we were actually youth pastors to Joel's wife, Megan. And they are our favorite batch of students because they're like the last group of kids that I was not old enough to be their mom. So I love it. But I am so, Joel, I am just so unbelievably proud of you and the work that you are allowing for God to do in you. I feel like a big sister who is just cannot brag enough. And so just thank you for being a part of what God is doing here in Kokomo. It's super special. A little bit about my family. My husband and I have been married for 25 years, and okay, that's when you all were supposed to be like, oh, she's too young. Okay, whatever. I have more kids that I know how to count. Here's a picture of our family. This was taken from my son's wedding 2 years ago. And then my second born just got married last month. And so the gentle giant on the far right-hand side, he's a junior in high school. And then my littles, we adopted them now 3 years ago. And so between marriages and adoption, if I can remember my child's name, I am winning at life. And so we have planted a church. It has been crazy. And so if you're here today and you don't know which way is up or which way is down, you are in good company. I'm grateful for you that you're here. And we are church planners. We love the local church. We have a marriage ministry that we go around the country speaking and pouring into marriages. And so we just love Jesus. And I am so privileged to be here with this church and the movement that God is doing in and through you. And so we're going to continue this series of speaking God from scratch and reclaiming these ancient words. And the word that I want to talk about today is the word love. You know, some of you are rolling your eyes, and it's okay. You're like, oh my gosh, we're talking about love. But wouldn't you say that love is the most overused word in the history of words? Right? We love our grandma, and we love our tacos. Right? We love that shirt we're wearing, and we love our kids. It is this word that we use as a very generic form of oh, I really like that. And it's a word that we use to have this deep meaning, I really love this person. And what I know to be true about me and true about you is that we've used it in a myriad of ways. And what I also know to be true about you and what's true about me is that we all have a love story. Now, some of you are like, oh, here we go. I don't mean a romantic love story. I mean a love story where can you remember a time where you first, recognized that somebody loved you? Somebody went above and beyond and did something kind for you. Well, I grew up in a blue-collar town called Joliet, Illinois. Anybody heard of Joliet? My husband calls it the Joylet. So we are famous for a lot of things, our diversity, our food, and our prisons. And so if you are 40 and over, you'll remember that movie, The Blues Brothers? That was our prison. That was featured in it. We're pretty proud of that movie. But I grew up in a biracial home. My dad's Hispanic. You think I'm young? Now you don't think I'm Mexican. I'm starting to not like you people, right? My sister looks Hispanic. My brother looks Italian, which we're not. And then there's me. We're like the children of the world. And my community was diverse. In fact, the school that I went to in elementary, it was an all African-American school up until the late 60s. And so diversity was the name of the game. But I have to be honest with you. When I think about being loved, it didn't come from a certain people group, but rather individuals along the way. And one of those individuals is named Dion Hornsby. He was a good friend of mine in the second grade. He's still a good friend of mine now. But he's that person, you have that person in your life, they're always happy. But not sugary happy that they get on your nerves, but they always find the positive perspective. This is Dion, and he's always been this way, and we could not be more opposite. He is dark as the night sky, and I am as white as, powdered sugar. He is super smart and was in all the accelerated classes, and I was not. And so in second grade, out of his encouraging heart, he's like, you know what? You should do the spelling bee. How many of you have gone to school with a cafetorium? Yeah, you go and eat, and there's you sit around the tables, and then there's this little faux stage. Well, that's where the spelling bee was being held, in our faux cafetorium. And so each grade went, separately. So second grade gets up. My maiden name is Lopez, so I'm kind of smack in the middle of the alphabet. And my knees are knocking. They call my name, and I go up to, the little microphone, and they say, bus. And they use it in a sentence. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get to the second round. I know how to spell bus. And so I puff up my chest and I speak loudly into the mic and I go, B-U-S-S. Yes, and that's what all of the classes did. They laughed at me. And I remember being done, that I was going to find Dion, and I was going to do not nice things to him, right? I was so mad. I was so embarrassed. And you know what Dion said? I can't, really remember exactly. I remember how he made me feel. But he said something to the fact of, you're awesome, and you're going to do better next time. As a second grader. When my kids were in second grade, it was a win if they showered. But he was so encouraging. And he was part of the first person that I remember showing love to me, defining love, who wasn't related to me. Do you remember the first time you were loved? And here's the deal. Your love story matters. Your love story matters. And maybe for you growing up, your experience with love was earning it. If you just did a good job, you would earn love. Maybe yours was performance or perfection. Love was being seen or not heard. Maybe you were one of those very blessed people to live in a house where you felt valued by everybody there. And you had a great, healthy perspective of love. And then you went to this place, this dark place called middle school. Right, ladies? It's a for real thing. But your love story matters because it shapes the way you receive love and give love. Your love story matters because it will dictate how you love God and how you are perceived that you love God. I love the Webster Dictionary. I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to the Bible and words, and so I'll go to the Bible and then I'll go to the dictionary. And this was a little bit of a letdown because I already knew this, but this is what the Webster Dictionary says about love. It says it's a profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person, a feeling of warm personal attachment or deep affection for a parent or child or friend, a person towards whom love is felt. Can you really use the word when you're trying to explain the word? I thought that you couldn't do that, but they do. And here's the deal. No matter how you define love, what oftentimes happens is we take that definition and we turn it into an equation. So if I have this definition of love plus the person I'm trying to love, it will equal what? Being loved. And if you are, more than 24 hours old, you know that oftentimes that equation doesn't work out. And so when we don't really know what love is, we go on this quest to figure it out. We try to figure out the equation because what is love plus loving people so that I can then have reciprocated love, that I can be loved in return. And what happens over time is I think that we become one of three people. I know over the several decades of my life, I have found myself in each of these people. And the first person that we can become and define love with is a people pleaser. When we define love as people pleasing, what we think the win is not rocking the boat. Don't say anything. Don't get into a fight. If you lasted all week with that girl who sits next to you at your office and you didn't get into it, you're like, I'm winning. Jesus is proud of me, right? I am loved. The problem is with people pleasing is that you allow yourself to get walked on. And you allow yourself to be quiet in a room, unseen and unheard. And so what happens is when we use people pleasing as our definition of love, we become bitter. Right? And then we get into the dangerous territory of being resentful. And then we watch our friendships dwindle because we don't trust anybody to hurt our heart. The second person we become is the bully. And the bully is interesting. Like, I'm a lover, not a fighter, but I can be a bully at times. And what's interesting about a bully is that when we become that bully persona of getting love, we really don't care as bullies if you love us. We just want the perception that we're loved. And so we don't care what you say behind our backs. We just want to make sure that, what the bigger circle of people think that we're valued. And what happens with the bully is they bulldoze over people, person after person, that they look back and then they realize they have no true deep friendships, right? Because they forced their definition of love on them. But I think the last person we can become, and I think the most dangerous that I have found myself becoming, is the over-dependent person, where we define love, our dependency of love is on the person we're trying to get love with. Maybe for you, this is a mother-in-law. I feel like I can say it now because I am a mother-in-law. I hope my girls don't feel this about me. But, there's a friend in your life, a family member in your life, and you don't know what comes over you. But when you are with them, somehow you become over-dependent. That you need their value to then give you value. That your definition of love is defined with what they think of you. And when we don't have the biblical answer for what love is, we're just exhausted. And maybe that's where you find yourself today. Like, you have been running this race of trying to figure out how to be a good friend, a good mom, a good wife. And the equation just isn't working out. You see, God's desire for your heart, it's not behavior modification. It's life transformation. God's desire for your heart isn't for you to behave your way into his love. He's saying, listen, what I desire for you is heart transformation. That is his love. Look what it says in 1 John chapter 4, verse 7. It says this: my beloved friends, let us continue to love each other, since love comes from God. I don't want you to lose that. That love comes from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and experiences a relationship with God. The person who refuses to love doesn't know the first thing about God, because God is love. So you can't know him if you don't love. And then he goes on to say, and this is what love looks like. It says, this is how God showed his love for us. God sent his son into the world so we might live through him. This kind of love we're talking about, not that we once upon a time loved God, but that he loved us, and he sent his son as a sacrifice to clear away our sins and the damage that's been done in our relationship with God. You see, God is love. Think about that. It originated from him. Or if you're wondering if this word love is real, what we are reclaiming the truth today is the answer is yes. It's not formulaic, and it's not dependent on our choices or our circumstances. God is, therefore love is. The struggle is, even if we today believed that that was true, that love comes from God, the biggest wrestling that most of us go through is believing that we're worthy of it, that we're going to be enough. When Justin and I got married, we were 20 and 21 years old. And 4 months into marriage, I found out I was pregnant, did not have the flu. And I wasn't a good cook, kind of thought it was my cooking, but it wasn't. And so 5 days after our first year anniversary, our son Micah was born. And we lived far away from family. And I'll never forget, those mamas in the house are listening, like you know where I'm going. But Micah was just a couple of months old, and he was just having such a bad day. Like, the only thing that would calm this child down was the shower. And honestly, I don't know how I figured that out, but we took so many showers that day that I just kept my robe on, just ready to beeline to the shower. And by 6 o'clock that evening, I was losing my mind. And so I called my husband, and I'm like, you need to come home. He was at an elders meeting that evening, of course, the day I need him home. And he's like 25 minutes away. And so we hang up the phone, and to my surprise, about 10 minutes later, there's a knock at our door. Well, we lived in this house that was broken up into apartments, and the lady upstairs, her name was Loopy. I am not joking. And she fell all the time. It's a true story. And so when there was a knock at the door, I thought, oh my gosh, something has happened. And I looked out front. In the front was an ambulance. I'm like, Loopy is falling and she can't get up. And so I'm like, they're at the wrong door. So I answer the door. Now, mind you, I am 21 years old. And I open the door to this beautiful looking 20-something EMT. And this old guy in his 40s who I would not even, like whatever, and I'm standing there in my robe, naked. I am standing there with a screaming baby and black mascara down my face because I thought if I got ready, it would trick Micah into thinking we were done with this day, and it didn't work. And so the EMT says, is your name Trisha Davis? And I'm like, it is. He's like, well, ma'am, your husband got pulled over by a police officer, and he told the police officer there was an emergency here, and so we were dispatched to you. Is there an emergency here? Now, mind you, Micah is screaming, and I look at him, and I'm like, well, not now, but when my husband gets home, there will be, right? So the 40-year-old EMT says, can we come in? And then he looks at Micah, he looks at me, he's like, can I hold him? I said, you can hold him, you can have him. Like, I'm done, right? And so, I'm trying to cover up, and we're sitting down, and you know what happened? You grandmas and grandpas, you are at fault at this too. The kid stopped crying. I was like, what is going on? He has been crying for hours, and this 40-year-old, just picked him up, scooped him up, and he calmed him down, and then he looked at me, and he said, Mom, you're doing a good job. And although it was meant to be this sweet moment of encouragement, it was the first time that I could remember were the guilt and fear of my love not being enough. Like, how can I not calm down my own child that I birthed, and some strange dude walks in and he's able to calm him down? It began to skew that somehow maybe who I am is not enough. And see, what happens when we are controlled by religion, rather than living in the freedom of salvation, we feel guilty for everything. This is what we do as Christians. We feel guilty over everything. We feel guilty that it's easy to love some of our friends and hard to love others. And if that others is sitting next to you, don't look at them, right? It's just that person, why can't I get it together with them? We feel guilty. We feel guilty over the exhaustion that is COVID-19. Right? We thought August was going to be the shift, and the shift didn't happen. And now we're realizing that there was no shift in our heart, and we feel tired, we feel overwhelmed, and we feel frustrated, and then we feel guilt. We feel guilty because we're not being the loving person that we want to be, because how much more can we take? We fear that if we don't love our spouse or our friends or our kids, that somehow we're going to lose them. In the church, we fear that if we don't go to church, join a small group, a Bible study, launch a worldwide ministry, or become social media famous with a global mission to change the world, that somehow we're not loving people. And God's saying, listen, if you continue to live out of that fear and guilt, if that defines what you think love is, two things are going to happen. One is you are going to start withholding your love. You're going to start living in isolation and losing your joy. Or you will continue to live a life of guilt and fear. And what I've learned about God is he says this: when guilt says you'll never measure up, God says, I want you to hear this. You are always enough. When God says that you don't measure up, God says you are always enough. I said that wrong. God always says you're enough. You're enough, because look at what it says in Romans chapter 3. It says, we are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus Christ. Right? There's no to-do list. It's just saying, Jesus, I believe in you. And when we have that belief in him, it says we are made right with God. And then it goes on to say, and this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are. So we get to authentically come to the table of who we are, knowing that in him we are enough. So if God is love, and we are made right with him, and we are enough in him, I think if we're going to reclaim this word love, we have to figure out then what is it? How do we act out of that love? Look at this passage found in 1 Corinthians. If you've been a part of weddings or church, if you like Hobby Lobby like I do, I'm not a crafty person like that. I like big projects and I have power tools. I'm that person. But I'm not like a crafty person, but I love Hobby Lobby. I don't know. And you always find this verse plastered somewhere in Hobby Lobby. And it's this, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. It says, love is. Okay, we're just going to stop right there. That God is love. And if God is love, this passage goes on to say that love is. It is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. And what I love about the New Testament is the ancient Greek in which it was written. Instead of them using love for both their grandma and their tacos, they had specific words that meant a specific kind of love. And so you had philo, which is like Philadelphia is like this brotherly type of love. And then you have eros, and that's like an exotic love. But the love that the original Greek word that we need to reclaim today, to just get back to the basics of who God says he is. He's saying this is agape love. This is an ultimate love. It is a love that is patient and kind. It is not envious. And when I became a Christian at 9 years old, I'm both a rule follower and a rebel. I don't know. I have lots of questions for Jesus. But I am. And when I came to know who Jesus was, when I recognized, when somebody told me that Jesus came from heaven and died on a cross for me, and that he would forgive me of my sins on a daily basis, and that the invitation of eternity with him was for me, it changed me. And when I began to read the Bible, like I didn't know about ministry. Like my dad worked construction. Like I just fell in love with the Bible. And you know what? I believed it. I believed it. And even in my innocent mind of thinking I understood this agape love, over time when I became an adult, I had my own equation that I perfected. And ministry was like the perfect soil to grow a perfect, very off and wrong view of love. Because somehow the purity that God is love, and because God is love, and his love is in me, and because that love is in me, I'm enough, I somehow thought that what I do for God plus others would equate not only being loved from you, but loved from God. So as a doer, if I just did the right thing, I don't mean just show up in the nursery, because special people in heaven, I mean, you guys have a special place in heaven if you are in the nursery, right? I love babies. I love the nursery. But like, if you do for God, if you say the right thing, if you don't cut that guy off, if you don't use that cuss word, if you don't use inappropriate sign language on the way to church, like then, right, then you are winning. And God loves you if you do this. And so here we are in ministry. We're this young couple. And 2 years into my own marriage, I find out that my parents are divorcing after 25 years. And I find out that my dad has this really dark history, and it obliterated my view of love. And oftentimes what happens is if we don't reclaim the truth of this word, we go back to the formula. So then I just worked harder. And I met Megan, and she was in my youth group. And I was going to love her to Jesus, and I was going to do everything right, and I wasn't going to fail her and my girls. I was going to be the perfect pastor's wife. And if I was, then my girls would love me, and God would be proud of me. And then we launch our first church, and it goes gangbusters the first 3 years. Hundreds of people coming. This is before social media. I won an award, right? Like, it was a big deal back then. But 3 years into this church plant and 10 years into marriage, my husband came home and he said he didn't want to do it anymore. He was done, not only with ministry, but with me. And we were separated for 2 months. And it was this next moment of what I thought the equation was being obliterated in my life. And my question is to you, as you remember that first time that you were loved, do you remember that first time where that love was taken away? Where you began to wrestle with this truth that, you know what, maybe this love isn't real. Have you been there? Maybe it's where you find yourself now. And I wish we had more time that I could tell you about my relationship with my dad and my relationship with my husband, that through his redemption, through God's redemption and grace and forgiveness, relationships have been restored, but that's not the purpose. The details don't matter. What matters is for you to hear that out of my stories of brokenness, love wins. It was love that didn't bring me back to my husband or back to a relationship with my dad. It was my love for Jesus. And it's who Jesus became in my heart that gave me enough. Where do you find yourself in that equation? Because here's the deal. Every single time I hit rock bottom, every single time that I was so over the equation, every single time that I was done with this Bible, I was done with church, I was done with the Christianese, every single time I hit rock bottom, Jesus reminded me that rock bottom is still solid surface to stand because God is. And because God is, his love is. And that's a love that we get to tap into every single day. If we want to reclaim this ancient word, we have to be willing to lay down our equations. We have to be willing to lay down our definition and take on the definition of love, that love is patient and kind. You see, it isn't a formula, it's an overflow. And so when you think of that passage, where does it bring you to? Do you feel inspired and empowered? Or do you feel less than and not enough? What if we decided today that we would allow God to use our wounds? That we would see that love is reclaimed when you and I allow God to use our deepest pain as a launching pad to our greatest calling? What if today love is reclaimed when you allow God to take all of it, and use it as redemptive pain, to use your deepest pain as a launching pad to your greatest calling? What if the city of Kokomo was changed by each and every one of you who decided that the pain and loss that you have experienced became a platform for you to say, but you know what? God's love carried me through. What if the city of Kokomo was changed if we laid down our formula and rested in the knowledge that God is? No matter who in your life has told you that you are not enough, you are not worthy, God says you are enough. You are mine. Remember the passage that I sent my son on this earth to die on a cross for you. His love is lavish. What if we decided to change the world by not living in the formula, but living in the overflow? So I want to close by just reading the passage one more time through a different translation. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Love is patient and kind. If you are struggling to be patient and kind, and you're trying to manufacture it on your own, God's saying, listen, lean into my love, reclaim my love, that through me I will make you patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Love does not demand its own way. Love is not irritable. I'm working on that one. It keeps no records of wrong when it has been wronged. It is never glad about injustice, but it rejoices whenever the truth wins out. See, oftentimes when people win, it feels like we lose. But someone's win is not your loss. Right? God's love is not about circumstances. It's not about hierarchy. It's not about value. It is. And it says, listen, whenever the truth wins out, I win. Love never gives up. God has not given up on you. He will give you enough to not give up on those he has placed in your life. He never loses faith, even when you feel like you are faithless. It is always hopeful, and it endures through every circumstances. God is love, and God is for you, and he declares you are enough. Let's pray.